Many researchers think that the method section is the easiest section of a manuscript to write because they are basically recounting the procedures that they or their team carried out. But I've edited hundreds of research manuscripts, and I've noticed that there are a few key elements of the method section that clinical researchers often overlook. And in this video, I'm going to share 5 things that you don't want to overlook in the method section of your clinical research manuscript. And in case we haven't met, hello, my name is Crystal Heron. I'm a trained biomedical scientist turned clinical researcher and now scientific and medical editor. And since 2011, I've helped scientists, clinicians, and medical writers communicate with clarity, credibility, and confidence. So the method section has different names depending on the journal that you're submitting to. Sometimes it's called methods or materials and methods or procedures or experimental procedures, and there are others. So be sure to check the author instructions for the particular journal that you're planning to submit to so that you can see if there's a specific heading that you need to use. So what is the purpose of the method section? The purpose of the method section is to share a clear, detailed explanation of the research design and how it was carried out so that someone can repeat exactly what you did. And this section also helps reviewers and other readers to assess the appropriateness of the methods or the soundness of the methods and whether they can be generalized. And if a reviewer thinks that the methods are not sound, they are more likely to recommend rejecting your paper. So you need to be just as careful with writing the method section as the other sections of the paper. So let's get to the 5 things that I see clinical researchers often overlook and that can lead to the paper being rejected, or maybe if you're lucky, just a request for revisions. Now, some of these things might seem minor and even trivial, but all of them are really important. And I'm going to share what they are and why they are important. So the first problem is that researchers will leave out the ethics statement. And so this statement discloses that the study was approved by an IRB or an institutional review board. And this statement also includes whether and how informed consent and, when applicable, informed assent was obtained. And so this statement needs to be included with the name of the committee or board and the approval number. You don't want to just say a generic that an IRB approved the study. You want to use the name of the board. Now, if the journal is using a blinded review process in such a way that you need to remove the name of your institution, you can just add a placeholder and fill in that detail later after the paper is accepted for publication. So this matters even if you're doing survey research or a retrospective chart review that might be exempt from IRB review and not require informed consent. And in these cases, many IRBs will simply give you an exemption letter, and you can say in your ethics statement that the IRB deemed the study as exempt and the requirement for informed consent was waived. Now, a question that I often get is where to place the ethics statement in the method section. And a good place to put it is at the end of a description of the overall study design, or at the very end of the method section in a separate paragraph or even in a separate subsection. Now, some journals do have dedicated ethics statement sections in the method section, although some will ask you to include an ethics statement in the disclosures at the end or on the cover page. So be sure to check the journal instructions to make sure that you include that detail where the journal requires it. Now, the second problem that I often see is that researchers will omit the study type from the methods, but you need to state the type of study, whether you're doing a retrospective analysis, a prospective cohort study, a randomized control trial, whatever study type you might be using. And if you're not sure about the study type, which I hope you are, and that was part of the design process, but if for some reason you are not, or you're taking quality improvement work and publishing it as a study, I will add a link in the description box that will take you to the Equator guidelines. And these guidelines are immensely helpful in ensuring that you include the right study type, you're designing the study properly, and you're including the necessary details about your particular study based on the study type. And not just in the method section, but in the entire paper. Now, the third problem that I often see is that researchers will omit the specific study time frame from the method section. They might share the length of the study, such as it was a year-long study or a 6-month-long study, but they will omit the exact dates. And these dates are important for a few reasons. The first reason is that science and medicine are constantly advancing with new treatments and technologies. And so including these dates will keep the paper current for readers so that no matter when your paper publishes, readers can keep in mind the dates that the paper was published and think about what was available at that time. Now, the second reason these dates are important are that different things happen in the world that could influence your study. For example, the pandemic caused upheaval in healthcare at first, and it slowly settled. But those things, that upheaval and that process of settling, can affect the research design, the outcomes, and various aspects of the study. And so those dates are important to include because they give readers that context. Now, the third reason these dates are important to include is that some studies are published years after the work was done for a whole host of reasons. And so without those dates, reviewers may think that your study is outdated and they won't recommend publishing the paper. So be sure to include the exact dates for the study period in your methods. And that means the year and the month, and when applicable, the day of the month as well. Now, the fourth problem that I often see is that researchers don't include a power analysis or sample size calculation. And this is so important because this analysis or calculation indicates the minimum sample needed to have enough statistical power to show a significant effect. So if the sample size is not large enough, then the p-values might really have no meaning. And so the reality is that this calculation should be done before the study even begins. If for some reason you're doing it after, you might learn that your study was underpowered, in which case it's less likely to get published. Now, you can disclose that you didn't do a sample size calculation and describe it as a limitation, but that will still limit the impact of the work. So before the study begins, do this calculation so you know that your study is appropriately powered to detect a meaningful difference, and include those details in your method section. Now, if you're not sure how to do this calculation, you can enlist help from a statistician. And some institutions have in-house statisticians that can help, or you can hire an independent consultant as well. Now, the last problem that I often see is a major issue, and it's that researchers don't describe the methods in enough detail that they can be replicated. And this could mean not including that sample size calculation that I mentioned a moment ago. It could also look like omitting full steps in the procedures so that they can't be replicated. And it can also look like omitting what seems like a minor procedure detail, like the companies and catalog numbers for reagents and lab equipment. And so, for example, formulations are different between companies and even lots. And so these details matter because they can affect the ability to replicate the work. And these details also show reviewers and readers that you were diligent in carrying out the procedures. Now, you might be wondering, well, how much detail do I really need to include? You need to include enough detail that someone can repeat the procedures without contacting you for more information. This means the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how, and get very detailed on the how. You want to give step-by-step instructions so that someone else can replicate exactly what you did. Now, if you're concerned about word count, you can include more details about the methods in the supplemental information where there is no word limit. Or if you've carried out similar methods in the past, you can cite the original publication for those particular procedures and then just describe what you did differently. Now, sometimes I will see people still give a brief description, but this isn't needed if you cite the reference. But the key is that you need to ensure that someone can replicate exactly what you did. So the 5 things that you don't want to overlook in the method section of your clinical research manuscript is leaving out an ethics statement, omitting the study type, excluding the study time frame, not doing and including a sample size calculation, and not including enough detail that the study can be replicated. If you overlook these details, you are less likely to get your paper published. And I'm curious, what do you often see researchers overlook in the method section? Or do you think that they often get something in particular wrong in the method section? I hope you'll share them below so that we can help others learn ways to write better method sections. And if you found this video helpful, you might also be looking for tips on how to write the discussion section. At the end of this video, I'll add a link to another video that I created about how to write this section. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you in the next video.